The train jolted as Marcus Ryland threw his arm in front of his 6-year-old daughter to keep her from falling off the seat. "Daddy," Violet said, wide-eyed, "this train is loud." "Yeah, baby," Marcus replied, pulling her coat tighter around her. "Just a little longer, okay? Then we'll be home." The clock above the train door read 11:42 p.m. The car was nearly empty, just a few scattered passengers and a woman sitting alone near the far end, her head down, long brown hair falling over her face, wearing a coat that didn't quite match the rest of her. Designer heels. A Rolex. But she was hugging herself like she didn't want anyone to notice. Marcus noticed. He was used to noticing things. As a single dad, he had to. Every penny, every second, every shift he took at the auto shop mattered. He'd lost sleep more nights than he could count since Violet's mom left 2 years ago. But right now, all he could see was that the woman looked scared and cold. He glanced back at Violet, who was already falling asleep against his side, her little hand wrapped around his. The train rocked again. The woman flinched. He stood up, careful not to wake his daughter, and walked over slowly. "Hey," he said quietly, not wanting to startle her. "You okay?" She looked up, startled, her eyes locked on his, large, hazel, and guarded. "I'm fine. You sure it's late?" "This isn't the safest time to be riding alone." "I'm not alone anymore, am I?" she said, voice soft but not weak. Marcus chuckled lightly. "No, I guess you're not. I'm Marcus. My daughter and I are on our way home." She hesitated, then said, "Juliette." "Juliette Garner. Nice to meet you, Juliette." There was a pause. Her fingers, adorned with a delicate diamond ring, definitely not costume, twisted in her lap. "You look like you've had a rough night," Marcus said gently, not pushing, just offering. Juliette looked down. "You could say that." He sat on the opposite bench, keeping space but staying nearby. "Well, you're safe here, I promise." Something in those 5 words made her eyes soften. He didn't say it like a man trying to be charming. He said it like a father who meant it. For a while, she didn't speak. Then quietly, "You have a kind face," he laughed. "That's a first. Usually I get people asking if I'm angry when I'm just thinking." She smiled just a little. "You're not angry, you're tired, guilty," he said, glancing over at Violet. "But she's worth every minute." Juliette followed his gaze. "She's beautiful. Thanks, she's the boss of me." He paused, then added, "We're heading back from my second job. She stays with my mom when I work nights, but tonight she begged to come with me, said she missed me." Juliette didn't say anything at first. "My dad used to work nights," she murmured after a beat, "but I didn't miss him like that." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That sounds complicated. That's a nice word for it." A moment passed before she looked at him again. "Why did you come talk to me?" "Because you looked like you needed someone to," he said simply. Juliette's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. The train screeched to a stop. Marcus stood. "This is us. You need a ride, I can walk you to your building." "Make sure you get there safe." Juliette hesitated. I'm not sure where I'm going." That stopped him. "You don't have a place." "I do," she said quickly. "I just don't want to go back there right now." Marcus studied her. "You okay?" "I will be." He looked down at Violet, then back at Juliette. "Listen, my mom's got a couch. It's not the Ritz, but it's warm and safe." Juliette's eyes widened. "I can't impose, you're not. You'd be helping me." "Violet never gets to have company." Juliette looked at him for a long moment. "You're serious." "Completely." And just like that, Juliette stepped off the train with them, her heels clicking against the platform, her designer coat wrapped tight around her. They walked 2 blocks to a small apartment where Marcus's mother, a kind woman with silver hair and a no-nonsense attitude, welcomed Juliette with a quick nod and a blanket. That night, Juliette slept on the couch, surrounded by the scent of cinnamon and baby shampoo, while Marcus tucked Violet into bed. And in the dark, Juliette whispered to herself, "What are you doing?" Because she knew exactly who she was. Juliette Garner, sole heir to Garner Holdings, a tech empire worth over $100 million. But for the first time in years, she felt safer on a stranger's couch than she ever had in her penthouse. And that stranger had no idea. The next morning, Marcus made pancakes while still wearing yesterday's work shirt. Juliette watched him from the kitchen doorway. "Thanks for not asking questions." He turned, spatula in hand. "Thanks for trusting me." Then Violet ran in, hair wild, laughing as she hugged Juliette's leg like she'd known her forever, and that's when Juliette realized she wasn't just grateful, she was already falling. Juliette stirred the chipped mug of coffee gently, watching the swirl of cream dissolve into amber. The small kitchen was filled with the smell of toast and eggs, and the faint hum of an old radio that crackled out jazz like it had been doing it for years. She sat at the narrow table, her fingers wrapped around the warmth of the mug, pretending she belonged there. Across from her, Violet was building a tower out of sugar packets, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. "You don't like syrup, do you?" Marcus asked, sliding a plate toward Juliette without waiting for an answer. "I do," she said, surprised, "but I haven't had pancakes like this since college." He wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "Then you've been missing out." Juliette took a bite. Her eyes widened and Marcus laughed. "I use a recipe from my grandmother. She never wrote it down, just said it was in her hands." "She was right," Juliette said, swallowing. "These are incredible. Don't let Violet hear that." "She thinks her cereal art is Michelin-starred." Violet looked up. "I'm going to have a restaurant. Daddy can wash the dishes." Marcus tilted his head. Generous promotion. Juliette watched them, a pang settling in her chest. She'd never seen love that casual, that constant. The kind that didn't need to be proven because it already was. "I should go," she said quietly, setting her fork down. Marcus's expression shifted. "You don't have to rush." "I do," she said, standing. "But thank you again, for everything." He nodded, though something flickered behind his eyes. "You got somewhere you can call, someone to meet you," she hesitated. "Yeah, I just needed air last night. I'm okay now." "All right," he said, but he didn't look convinced. Juliette bent down to hug Violet. "Thanks for letting me stay, Chef," Violet giggled. "Come back next time." "We'll make spaghetti," Juliette smiled. "That sounds like a plan." She stepped out into the hallway, coat buttoned up, heels echoing against the floor, but when she reached the street, she didn't call a car, she walked. Past bakeries opening their shutters, past a man sweeping the sidewalk, past the corner newsstand with yesterday's headlines still displayed. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. She ignored it. She made it 10 blocks before stepping into a coffee shop with mirrored walls and marble floors. The barrister recognized her immediately. "Miss Garner, your usual?" She nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Yes, and have someone bring the car around." 10 minutes later, she was in the back seat of a black luxury sedan, staring out the tinted window at the city that used to feel like hers. "You didn't come home last night," her assistant said from the front seat, her tone carefully neutral. "I didn't want to," Juliette replied. Her assistant glanced back. "Your father's attorney called. They're finalizing the board vote. If you don't show up this week, you'll lose your seat. I never wanted it in the first place." "That doesn't mean they won't take it." Juliette leaned her head against the window. "Let them." Later that afternoon, Marcus stood behind the counter at the auto shop, grease staining his hands when his coworker nudged him. "Pretty woman outside, asking for you." Marcus wiped his hands quickly and stepped out. There she was, wrapped in a different coat, hair pinned back, standing beside a car that didn't belong in this part of town. "Sleek, black, imported, you lost?" he asked, approaching. Juliette turned. "Not anymore," he blinked. "Didn't expect to see you again." "I didn't expect to come back," she said, "but I didn't want to leave things like that." Marcus folded his arms, curious. "Like what?" "Like I was running." He gave a small nod. "Were you?" "Yes." She stepped forward. "Can I take you to dinner?" He raised an eyebrow. "You want to feed me after I cooked for you?" "I owe you," she said. "I don't keep score." "I do." There was a pause. "I get off at 6, he said finally. "I'll be here." She turned and walked back to her car. He watched as it pulled away, engine barely making a sound. Inside the shop, his coworker whistled. "Friend of yours?" Marcus shook his head. "No." "Not exactly." That evening, Marcus changed into a shirt that didn't have oil stains and made sure Violet was set up at his mother's with her favorite puzzle. He waited outside the shop at 5:59. At 6 precisely, a different car pulled up. Smaller, less flashy, but clearly expensive. Juliette stepped out, wearing a navy blouse, her hair loose this time. He opened the passenger door. "You didn't have to come dressed like that." "I didn't," she said. "This is just me." They drove to a restaurant neither of them could have afforded a month ago, but tonight Juliette paid. Inside, dim chandeliers glowed over velvet booths. Marcus looked around, then leaned in. "You sure this place is me?" Juliette smiled. "Maybe not, but I wanted to see what you look like under gold lighting," he laughed. Like a tired mechanic, like a man who doesn't know how rare he is. He stared at her for a long moment. "You always talk like that, only when I mean it. And what if I told you I don't belong in a place like this? Then I'd tell you that has nothing to do with where you came from and everything to do with what you believe." Marcus leaned back. "You're not just some girl on a train, are you?" Juliette's smile faded slightly, but she held his gaze. "No, I'm not. You gonna tell me who you are?" "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I like the way you look at me right now." He didn't push further. Instead, he picked up his glass and tapped it gently against hers. "To strange rides," he said. "To second chances," she replied. And as they talked, the world outside the restaurant faded into shadows, and the space between them warmed into something neither of them had expected. Juliette stepped into the penthouse she hadn't returned to in 4 days. The silence was sharp, almost accusing, as if the marble floors and glass walls remembered her absence. Light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the untouched piano in the corner and the rows of untouched wine above the built-in bar. She dropped her keys on the counter and peeled off her heels, her feet aching despite the driver's short drop-off. Her assistant had filled the fridge, the housekeeper had left fresh linens. Everything was in its place, and yet none of it felt like hers anymore. She crossed to her closet, pulled out a garment bag, and laid it on the bed. Inside was a dress she hadn't worn before, a rare choice. She never bought anything without a purpose. Everything she owned was for a gala, a boardroom, a fundraiser, but this one had been an impulse. Pale bronze silk, clean lines, no embroidery, simple, like the way Marcus looked at her. She had no intention of attending the company's quarterly celebration that evening. But then again, she hadn't intended to meet a man who could make her forget the weight of her last name. At the same time, across the river, Marcus stood at the sink in his mother's apartment rinsing out Violet's paintbrushes. She just dozed off on the couch with a book still open on her chest, one arm dangling off the edge. He glanced toward the front door. The same door Juliette had stepped through days earlier. She'd come back twice since then, once with takeout and once to help Violet with her school project. Each time she'd left too quickly, like she was afraid if she stayed too long, she wouldn't leave at all. His mother entered the kitchen, drying her hands. "She's got a good heart," she said, nodding toward the living room. Marcus frowned. "You don't even know her." "I know the way she looks at my granddaughter. And I know how you've been shaving before she comes over." He let out a breath, setting the paintbrush down. "She's not staying, Ma, you sure about that?" "No, but I'm sure she doesn't belong in our world." "She came back, didn't she?" He didn't answer. That night, Juliette stood in front of the full-length mirror, pinning her hair into a loose twist and fastening a single gold pendant around her neck. The driver waited downstairs. The gala was already in full swing at the Garnier Hotel downtown, a place named after her grandfather. As she stepped into the ballroom, a wave of camera flashes erupted. She blinked against them but kept walking, each step deliberate. People turned, heads tilted. She hadn't been seen publicly in weeks. Her father's former partner approached her near the Champagne Tower. "Juliette. We were beginning to wonder if you'd vanished for good." She took the flute from his hand. "Would that have disappointed you or relieved you, Colin?" He gave a tight smile. "Depends on whether you've come to reclaim your seat. I've come to remind you it was never yours to steal." She moved past him, ignoring the startled whispers. She didn't stop until she reached the back terrace, where lights from the skyline flickered in the distance. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, a message from her assistant. "Marcus Rylan is listed in the city registry. Works at an auto shop, no debt, no criminal record. 1 child, single custody." She closed the screen without replying. Below, valets moved in and out, parking cars and ushering guests inside. And then she saw him, Marcus, wearing a charcoal button-down and dark slacks, his jacket folded over one arm as if unsure whether it belonged. He didn't look up. Just followed the doorman through the side entrance, clearly out of place but walking like he didn't care. She didn't wait. She turned and left the terrace, heels clicking fast on marble. He was just stepping into the edge of the ballroom when she appeared in front of him. Marcus stopped. "I wasn't sure if I'd find you." She looked up at him, breath catching. "Why are you here? I got your message." "I didn't." She stopped. "I didn't send one." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded note. It was handwritten, her handwriting. The one she'd tucked into Violet's backpack days ago, never expecting him to read it. "If you ever wonder where I come from, come find me Friday night at the Garnier. You might hate me after, but at least you'll know." She swallowed hard. "I was scared you would." "I almost did," he said. "Then I figured I'd rather hear the truth from you than make up my own story." Her voice dropped. "You're standing inside a hotel named after my family. My last name isn't just Juliette, it's Garner, as in Garner Holdings." He didn't react right away, just looked at her. "I've never lied to you," she added quickly. "I just didn't tell you everything." He glanced around. "So this is your world?" "Yes. And what am I doing in it?" "That's up to you." Marcus stepped closer. "I've never been to a place like this before, I know, but I've been in rooms where no one sees me, and that's exactly what this feels like." She took his hand. "Then let's leave." "Won't they talk?" "They already do," she whispered. "But I don't care anymore." They walked out together, her hand in his, the crowd parting like water. Back in the car, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions. Just held her hand tighter. When they pulled up to the building she hadn't planned to return to, Marcus looked at her. "You want me to walk you up? I want you to come up, Juliette." "I'm not asking you to stay," she said. "I'm asking you to see it, all of it. So you know I've got nothing left to hide." He nodded once. She led him through the private elevator into the penthouse that had been silent too long. He didn't comment on the art or the view or the grand piano. He just watched her. She turned to him. "You don't have to pretend this doesn't change things." "I'm not pretending anything." "Then tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking you don't need saving," he said, "but you deserve someone who knows how to stand beside you." Her throat tightened. "And that's you." "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But I'm not walking away." She stepped toward him. "I don't want you to." Then, in the middle of the room, under the glow of a chandelier worth more than his annual salary, she kissed him, and everything that didn't matter fell away. Juliette traced her fingers lightly along the edge of the balcony railing as the wind lifted her hair. The skyline stretched endless before her, but she wasn't looking at it. She was watching Marcus through the glass doors behind her. He stood in her kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pouring water into a kettle like he'd done it 1,000 times. He didn't ask where to find things. He just moved like someone who saw the world in steps, assess, adapt, act. And for the first time in this penthouse, the silence didn't feel like a verdict. "You have a whole coffee machine that probably cost more than my car," he said, glancing at her through the open door, "and you still have a kettle from the grocery store. That's the only thing in this place I actually picked out myself." He brought her a cup, not asking how she took it, just handing it over and sitting beside her on the cushioned bench. "I used to think this view meant something," Juliette said. "Power, control, like if I could see the whole city, I could own it. And now it just looks like lights." He watched her for a moment. "You regret any of it?" She shook her head. "I regret thinking it made me untouchable." That's the thing about being born. With everything you start believing you don't owe anyone anything. Then one person treats you like a human and it wrecks the lie. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm not trying to wreck anything. I just want the truth. I don't know how to give you the version that makes me worthy of you. That's not your call." She turned to face him fully. "I don't know what I'm doing. I've spent my life making decisions based on what would satisfy a boardroom. And now all I want is to know what it feels like to wake up next to someone who doesn't care about my last name. You want that with me?" "Yes." Marcus was quiet for a long stretch. The wind shifted, lifting the hem of her dress slightly, but she didn't move. "You know I can't give you jets or galas. I don't need them. I just need someone to hold on to when everything else goes quiet." He stood suddenly, holding out his hand. "Come with me." "Where? Does it matter?" She took it. An hour later, they stood on a rooftop flat, tarred, nothing glamorous about it. Below them, the street buzzed with late-night chatter and neon signs. A string of mismatched bulbs stretched across the rooftop, some flickering, others out entirely. "This is where you brought me?" she asked, a laugh catching in her throat. He shrugged. "You said you wanted real. This is my friend's apartment building. He lets me come up here when I need air. She looked around. It's awful. It is. He pulled a folded blanket from behind a vent and set it on the ground, but the moon's still the same size up here as it is from your penthouse. She sat beside him. What happens now, that depends, he said. You planning on running again? No. Then we figure it out. Juliette leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't want to live in two different worlds. Then don't. Bring them together. She hesitated. That's going to upset a lot of people. Good. She laughed, the sound quiet and unguarded. Back at Marcus's mother's apartment the next morning, Violet ran into Juliette's arms before she'd even finished knocking. You didn't come yesterday. I had to do something very important, Juliette said, lifting her up, but I brought you something. She handed her a small box. Inside was a tiny silver chain with a single star pendant. Is it real? Violet asked. As real as you, Juliette whispered. From the kitchen, Marcus's mother watched with arms crossed. You planning on sticking around this time? She asked. Juliette stood a little straighter. If you'll have me. The older woman nodded slowly. Then help me with breakfast. Juliette followed her into the kitchen, tying her hair back with a rubber band from the counter. She cracked eggs under the woman's watchful eye, burning the first one, then laughing when the second came out better. Marcus walked in moments later, freezing at the sight of Juliette in his mother's apron. You okay? He asked. She wiped flour from her cheek. I think I just passed initiation. That night, Juliette sat cross-legged on Marcus's couch, Violet asleep beside her, the TV playing a cartoon on low volume. Marcus returned from the bedroom holding a small envelope. What's this? She asked. He handed it to her. You said you didn't want to live in two worlds, so I figured we make one. Inside was a drawing. Violet's, clearly. A house with 3 stick figures. One tall, one medium, one small. Above it, in big purple letters, it said, Our home. Juliette's throat tightened. She made this. She said she wanted to show you where you belonged. Juliette looked up. She's smarter than both of us. Definitely, Marcus said. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Then Juliette leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. Are you sure this is what you want? She asked. No, he said, but I'm sure about you. Weeks passed. Juliette stepped down from the board, surprising everyone. She sold her shares quietly, donated a portion to fund scholarships for single parents, and opened a small foundation under her mother's maiden name, anonymous, silent hers. Marcus expanded the auto shop with a new wing for electric vehicles, thanks to a gift Juliette handed him in a plain envelope. No logo, no explanation. This is too much, he said. It's an investment, she replied. In you, they never moved into the penthouse. Instead, they found a brownstone with creaky stairs and a backyard Violet could paint in. On weekends, they fixed it up together, Marcus with a drill, Juliette with a paintbrush, Violet with glitter glue that ended up on everything. One morning, Juliette stood in the doorway, watching Marcus tie Violet's shoes before school. The sunlight hit his jaw, catching the faintest curve of a smile. She stepped forward and kissed his temple. What was that for? He asked. For being the safest place I've ever landed. He turned to her. You still scared? Not anymore. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't, not of falling, not of trusting, not of love. Juliette flipped the open sign on the door and stepped into the freshly painted shop, the scent of cut wood still lingering in the air. The space was modest, exposed brick walls, shelves lined with handmade toys and books, and a reading nook tucked under the staircase where a golden beanbag sat beside a basket of crayons. She adjusted the stack of flyers on the counter and exhaled. The door behind her creaked open. You forgot this, Marcus said, holding out a clipboard with a half-filled form clipped to it. Enrollment for next month's art class. I thought I left it at the apartment, she said, taking it with a grin. You did, he replied, under the toaster. I was filing it, she teased. Horizontally, he leaned on the counter. You really think this place is going to work? I don't think, she said. I know. He reached over and tapped the sign hanging above the bookshelves, the Violet House. You named it after her. She gave me the idea, Juliette said. She said she wanted a place where kids could make messes and grown-ups wouldn't make them stop. She's got a future in branding. Juliette leaned across the counter. She's got a future in everything. The bell above the door jingled again, and Marcus's mother entered with Violet in tow, her backpack bouncing with every step. Someone insisted on showing you her surprise, the older woman said. Violet ran straight to Juliette, pulling a folded piece of paper from her jacket. Look what I made, Juliette unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing of the shop, complete with windows, shelves, and 3 stick figures waving from inside. I love it, Juliette said. Can I hang it by the front door? Yes, but high up so nobody spills juice on it. Marcus crouched beside them. You ready for your dance class this afternoon? Violet nodded. I practiced my twirls. Want to see? In a minute, he said. Let's not knock over any shelves before opening. Juliette stood and reached for her bag. I'll take her after lunch. You have the budget meeting with the contractor. Marcus made a face. I'd rather sit through 5 hours of cartoons. That can be arranged, Violet said brightly. As they laughed, a customer stepped in, a woman with 2 toddlers and a tired smile. She held up the flyer. Is this the place for the free story hour? It is, Juliette said. You're right on time. She led them to the reading nook, handing each child a tiny beanbag and a book with folded corners. The mother mouthed a thank you as she settled into a chair nearby, shoulders sagging with relief. Marcus watched Juliette crouch down to help one of the toddlers open his book. She didn't hesitate or look out of place. She belonged here in this world they'd built from scratch. Later that evening, when the shop was closed and Violet was asleep upstairs in the apartment above, Marcus found Juliette on the back deck, barefoot, sipping from a chipped mug. The city lights reached them faintly, but the stars were visible tonight, something neither of them had noticed much before. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. You ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't gotten on that train? All the time, she said, resting her head against his chest. What do you think? I think I'd still be living in a glass box, telling myself it was a crown. He kissed the top of her head. And now I have glitter on my kitchen table, finger paint on my jeans, and a man who makes coffee without asking how I take it. His voice was quiet. I'm not going anywhere, Jules. I know. She turned to face him, still holding her mug in one hand. Do you remember what you said to me that night, on the train? I said you were safe. You were wrong. He raised an eyebrow. I wasn't safe, she said. I was seen, for the first time. She set the mug down and reached into her pocket. I have something for you. He took the envelope she handed him and opened it slowly. Inside was a deed. To the shop, he asked, confused. To the building, she said. The whole thing, it's yours, Juliette. I didn't buy it, I traded for it. My last remaining asset with the Garner name on it. I wanted this to be clean. Ours. He looked down at the paper, then back at her. You're serious? I am. No more penthouses, no more boardrooms. Just this. I don't know what to say. Say you'll build a second garage on the back lot and finally teach those kids how to change a tire like you've been talking about. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. This time it wasn't hurried or cautious. It was grounded, certain. The kind of kiss that came after every secret had been told, every wall stripped bare. A wind swept through the alley, lifting old leaves into the air. Somewhere above them, a window creaked. Juliette pulled back slightly. You think Violet's watching us? I hope not, he said. She's got bedtime in 10 minutes. I gave her an extra half hour, Juliette whispered. She finished her book. He stared at her. You're the soft parent, you're the fun one. They went back inside, hand in hand, the house smelling of lavender and pasta. Upstairs, they found Violet curled up with a blanket and her new storybook, pretending to snore. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead. Nice try, she opened one eye. Did you kiss Juliette again? Juliette laughed. Is that your business? Violet grinned. Only if there's a wedding. Marcus looked at Juliette. You hear that? I did. Well, she looked at Violet, then back at him. Let's build the rest of this life together first, he nodded. Deal. And so they did. They turned the garage into a workshop for kids. Started a weekend program for teens who needed a second chance. Juliette taught storytelling. Marcus taught repair. Violet ran the snack table. They lived in the apartment above the shop, with creaky floors and a window that whistled in the winter. They filled it with noise, laughter, music, arguments about who left the milk out, and the sound of Violet practicing her dance steps in the hallway. There were no more secrets. No more rooms too big for conversation. Just real life, real love, and a world they'd made with their own hands. And every morning, Juliette woke up beside the man who'd looked at her on a train and saw not her name, not her money, but her. And every night, Marcus kissed her goodnight like it was the first time all over again. They built something no one could take from them, and it was everything.